I never thought I'd see their faces again. Yet there they were, standing at the gate of the mansion my aunt had left me, looking as if they owned the world. My mother's trembling voice broke the silence first. "Emma, sweetheart, we've come back for you." Back for me? The same people who had vanished from my life 15 years ago, the ones who abandoned me like a piece of trash when I was just a scared little girl, they were suddenly here again. And not by coincidence. They had returned the very moment the lawyer announced I had inherited Aunt Rebecca's entire fortune, her businesses, her sprawling estate, her millions locked away in the bank. I stood frozen, my heart racing, my fists tightening at my side. Rage swirled inside me, but so did confusion. Were they here for me or for the money? I stared into the eyes of the people who gave me life and then threw me away, and for the first time in my life, I held the power. But what was I supposed to do with it? That was the moment I realized my life was no longer just mine, it was a stage, and they had returned as uninvited actors. And what happened next would shock even me. My name is Emma Collins. I was born in Dallas, Texas, to parents who never really wanted me. At least, that's what I believed for most of my life. My father, Richard, was a man who lived for gambling, and my mother, Claire, followed him like a shadow, chasing fast money and dangerous thrills. They were young when they had me, too young. And as far as I could remember, they always looked at me as if I was a burden holding them back from their fun. When I was 7 years old, my world shattered. One rainy night, they packed their bags, argued in hushed voices I could barely understand, and walked out the door. I remember sitting by the window with tears streaming down my face, waiting for headlights to come back up the driveway. They never did. The next morning, Aunt Rebecca showed up. She was my father's older sister, a woman who wore pearls and lipstick even when she went grocery shopping. She took one look at my tear-stained face and scooped me into her arms. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered. "You have me now, and I will never, ever leave you." And she kept that promise. Aunt Rebecca raised me like her own daughter. She gave me a life I never imagined. Summer trips to California, ballet classes, piano lessons, the best schools. But more than the luxuries, she gave me love. Real, unconditional love. The kind that filled the cracks my parents left in my heart. Still, I never stopped wondering. Why had my parents left me? Where had they gone? Did they ever think about me? That question haunted me for years. By the time I turned 22, Aunt Rebecca's health began to decline. She was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, and suddenly the woman who had always been my strength grew weak and frail before my eyes. I spent nights by her bedside, holding her hand, begging God not to take her from me. But the inevitable came. On the day she died, I felt like I had been orphaned all over again. But even in death, Aunt Rebecca had one last gift for me. Her will. When the lawyer read it aloud, I nearly collapsed. She left me everything. The mansion, her jewelry collection, her restaurants, her company shares, her cars, her entire fortune. I went from being a girl who once begged for her parents' love to becoming one of the wealthiest young women in Texas. And that was the exact day they returned. My parents. They came walking up the long driveway, as if they belonged there. My mother's eyes were red, as if she had practiced crying in the car. My father wore a cheap suit that screamed fake respectability. I felt my blood boil, just looking at them. "Emma," my father said, his voice low and careful. "We know we've made mistakes. But we're here now. We want to make things right." I wanted to scream in his face. Mistakes? Is that what he called 15 years of silence? Mistakes? The mansion staff hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene, and the lawyer who had just read the will stood stiff, watching the scene unfold like a soap opera. My chest heaved with anger, but a strange, dark thought crept into my mind. What if this was my chance for revenge? For years, I had imagined what I would do if they ever came back. Sometimes I dreamed of running into their arms, desperate for the love I never had. But other nights, I imagined making them feel the exact pain they had given me. The sting of rejection, the coldness of betrayal, the taste of abandonment. Now here they were, practically on their knees, at the mercy of my wealth, my decisions, my power. I should have slammed the gates on them. I should have told them to leave and never come back. But instead, I heard myself say something I never planned. Come inside. The words came out calm, almost emotionless, but my mind screamed with chaos. I wasn't letting them in out of forgiveness. No. This was the beginning of something else. Something darker. As they stepped into the house, smiling weakly as though they had won, I felt my lips curl into a smile too. But mine was different. Mine was the smile of a girl who had been broken, abandoned, and scarred, and who was now holding the knife that could cut back. They thought they had come back for an easy fortune. But what they didn't know was that they had just walked straight into my trap. And that night, something happened in the mansion that none of us would ever forget. That night, the air inside the mansion felt heavy, as if the walls themselves knew trouble had walked in. My parents sat across from me in Aunt Rebecca's grand dining room, pretending like nothing had happened. My mother glanced around the crystal chandelier, the marble floor, the silver cutlery, her eyes glowing with hunger, not the hunger of a starving woman, but the hunger of greed. "This house," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's beautiful, Emma. You've done well." Done well? I gripped the edge of my chair to stop my hands from shaking. I hadn't done well. I hadn't earned this. Everything in this house, every piece of furniture, every stone, every book on the shelf, was because of Aunt Rebecca. Not them. Not the people who had left me to cry myself to sleep on the night they vanished. I swallowed hard, staring at them both. "You didn't come back for me," I said finally, my voice sharp, trembling with restrained fury. "You came back for this." I spread my arms, pointing at the walls, the chandeliers, the wealth dripping from every corner. Silence. My father cleared his throat. "Emma, listen, we know how it looks. But we're still your parents. Blood is blood. We just want to be part of your life again. Money or not." Liar. I wanted to spit the word in his face. But instead, I leaned back and forced myself to stay calm. If they wanted to play games, then I would play too. Only this time, I would be the one setting the rules. "Fine," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you really came for me, then prove it." Their heads snapped up, eyes widening with fake hope. "Anything," my mother said quickly, her trembling hands clasping together. "We'll do anything." I smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. "Good. Then stay here tonight. Be my guests. Let's see if you can handle one night in the house of the woman who raised me when you threw me away." They exchanged nervous glances, but agreed. Of course they agreed. They thought they were winning. They thought they had wormed their way back into my life. But that night, something shifted. I couldn't sleep. I wandered the long halls of the mansion, my bare feet brushing against the cold marble tiles. The moonlight spilled through the tall glass windows, casting shadows that seemed alive. I stopped outside the guest room where my parents were staying. I pressed my ear to the door. Inside, their voices were low but sharp. "Richard," my mother whispered, "we have to secure it fast. If we play nice, she'll hand it over. She's young. She's naive. We can convince her to let us manage the fortune. Then we're set for life." My chest tightened, my breath catching. Naive? Was that what they thought? That I'd just hand over Aunt Rebecca's empire like a gullible child desperate for their approval? My father's voice cut through. "Careful, Claire. She's not as weak as she looks. But don't worry. If she refuses," he paused, "we'll find a way. One way or another. The money will be ours." I cover my mouth to keep from gasping. My knees nearly gave out. They hadn't come back for me at all. Not for love. Not for regret. For money. Pure, filthy money. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't a little girl anymore, waiting by the window for headlights that never came back. I was a woman with power, with a fortune, with an empire. And I was going to use every piece of it to make them pay. The next morning, I confronted them at breakfast. I wanted to see if they would lie to my face after the words I'd overheard. "So," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee, "why did you come back now after 15 years? My mother hesitated. Emma, we told you. We missed you. We made mistakes. Cut the act, I snapped, slamming the cup onto the table so hard that coffee splashed over the rim. My voice shook, but this time with anger I didn't bother to hide. I heard you last night. Their faces drained of color. I know the truth, I continued, my voice cold as ice. You're not here for me. You're here for Aunt Rebecca's money. And if you think I'm stupid enough to hand it over, you've underestimated me. My father stood, his jaw tightening. Watch your tone, young lady. We're still your parents. Parents. The words stabbed me like a knife. No, I whispered, my hands trembling. Parents don't abandon their child in the middle of the night. Parents don't disappear for 15 years without a word. Parents don't only come back when there's money involved. You're not my parents. You're strangers. The room went silent. Their eyes darkened, their fake smiles vanishing. My father's voice dropped low, cold. Be careful, Emma. You don't know who you're dealing with. And then he said something that chilled me to my bones. You think this fortune makes you untouchable? Money has destroyed stronger people than you. If you're not careful, it'll destroy you too. He leaned across the table, his eyes burning into mine. Or worst, we will. My heart stopped. The room spun. I stared at him, trying to process the words. Did my father, my own father, just threaten me? For a moment, no one moved. My mother clutched his arm, whispering, Richard, stop. But her eyes gave her away. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't scared. She agreed with him. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about manipulation anymore. It was about survival. That morning, the first seed of real fear took root in my heart. But with it came something else, something darker. Revenge. And as I sat there, staring at the two people who had given me life only to come back to try to ruin it, I made a silent promise to myself. If they wanted war, then war was what they were going to get. But I had no idea that before the week was over, blood would be spilled inside that very mansion. I barely ate that morning. My father's words kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. Or worse, we will. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. A direct one. For the rest of the day, I walked around the mansion with a strange sense of being watched. Every time I turned a corner, I half expected to see my parents lurking in the shadows. The staff kept their distance, unsure of what to make of the tension. To them, my parents were guests. To me, they were intruders. By nightfall, the house had grown too quiet, too still. I sat in Aunt Rebecca's library, staring at the crackling fireplace, trying to calm the storm inside me. That was when I heard it, footsteps. Soft, careful, almost calculated. I turned. My father was standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that sent shivers racing down my spine. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. Emma, he said, his voice low and unsettling. We need to talk. I don't think there's anything left to say, I answered sharply, keeping my eyes on him. He smirked. Oh, there's plenty to say. You think you're safe because the law says this mansion belongs to you. But laws can be broken. People can be persuaded. And accidents happen all the time. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought he could hear it. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound strong. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. If you don't give us access to Rebecca's fortune, something might happen to you. Something no one could trace back. My blood ran cold. That was it. The mask was gone. The lies, the fake apologies, the excuses stripped away. This wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't even about manipulation anymore. It was about taking what they wanted by force. I stood, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. You won't touch me, I spat, my voice cracking with a mix of fear and rage. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed. A cold, hollow laugh that echoed off the library walls. You sound just like your aunt, he sneered. Always so self-righteous. Always thinking she was untouchable. And where is she now? Buried 6 feet under. My body shook. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. But instead, I forced myself to stay still. And then, without warning, the door burst open. My mother rushed in, her face pale, her voice trembling. "Richard, stop it. You're scaring her." He turned to her sharply. "She needs to be scared. That's the only way she'll understand." I looked between them, my chest heaving. Something inside me broke. I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, the threats. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice echoing through the mansion. "Both of you, get out of this house right now before I call the police." For a moment, silence. My parents exchanged glances. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. My mother's lips quivered, but she said nothing. Finally, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. My mother lingered for a second, her eyes meeting mine. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw something, guilt, maybe even sadness. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She turned and followed him out. I sank into the chair, my whole body trembling. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears blurred my vision. I felt small again, like that little girl abandoned in the middle of the night. Except this time, I wasn't powerless. I picked up the phone and dialed the police. My hands shook as I explained that my parents had broken into my home, that they were threatening me, that I feared for my life. The officer on the line assured me they would send someone immediately. Relief washed over me, until I heard it. A scream. It came from the other side of the mansion. High-pitched, filled with panic. My mother's voice. I dropped the phone and ran, my heart pounding, my bare feet slapping against the cold marble floor. The scream came again, this time cut off suddenly, as if something, or someone, had silenced her. I turned the corner, breathless, and froze. There, at the bottom of the grand staircase, lay my mother's body. Her neck twisted unnaturally, her eyes wide open in terror, her hand still clutching the railing as if she had tried to hold on. Blood pooled beneath her head, staining the white marble steps. I gasped, my hands flying to my mouth. Standing at the top of the stairs was my father, his face pale, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His eyes locked on mine, wild and unblinking. "She slipped," he said quickly, his voice shaking. It was an accident, but the way he said it, the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes darted nervously, told me otherwise. My mother was dead, and my father was the only one who knew the truth. The sight of my mother's lifeless body at the bottom of the staircase is burned into my memory forever. Her open eyes seemed to stare straight through me, as if accusing me for not saving her. My legs shook beneath me, my throat dry, but my father's trembling voice dragged me back to reality. "She slipped, Emma," he stammered. "You saw it. She slipped." But I hadn't seen her fall. I had only heard her scream. And the look on his face, the panic, the guilt, the way his hands wouldn't stay still, told me this was no accident. Before I could speak, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The police. My call. My father's eyes darted toward the front door. "Don't say anything," he hissed. "You hear me? Don't you dare say anything." I couldn't move. My body was frozen with shock, but inside my mind, thoughts clashed like thunder. My mother was dead. My father might have killed her. And now the police were on their way. Seconds later, flashing red and blue lights filled the mansion's driveway. 2 officers rushed inside, followed by paramedics who immediately crouched over my mother's body. I watched numbly as they checked her pulse, exchanged grim looks, and shook their heads. "She's gone," one of them whispered. The officer turned to me. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened here?" My lips parted, but before I could speak, my father cut in. "She fell," he said firmly, stepping forward. His voice had suddenly steadied, his confidence returning like armor. "We were arguing, she stormed off, and she slipped on the stairs. I tried to grab her, but it was too late." The officers looked at him, then at me. "Ma'am," one of them pressed. "Do you confirm his statement?" My throat tightened. Every eye in the room was on me, The officers, the paramedics, even the staff gathered nervously at the edges. And standing across from me, my father's gaze bore into mine, sharp and threatening, silently daring me to betray him. I swallowed hard, my heart thundering in my chest. I wanted to scream the truth, to tell them that I didn't believe it was an accident, that I thought he had pushed her. But then his words from last night replayed in my head. Accidents happen all the time. If I told the police the truth, would I be next? Yes, I whispered finally, my voice barely audible. She slipped. The officer nodded, jotting something down. My father exhaled quietly, his shoulders relaxing. I had just saved him. Or maybe I had just condemned myself. The next day was a blur of grief and suspicion. The mansion, once filled with luxury and warmth, now felt like a crime scene. My mother's body was taken away, and the staff walked around in silence, afraid to even breathe too loudly. But I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. The scream, the silence, the way she landed, as if she'd been pushed, the wild look in my father's eyes. I couldn't shake it. By evening, the police returned to question me again. This time, they were more direct. Miss Collins, one officer said, his voice serious, we noticed some bruises on your mother's arms. Do you know how she got them? My heart pounded. Bruises. They had found bruises. My father sat beside me during the questioning, his hands folded neatly, his expression calm, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. She bruised easily, he said smoothly, before I could answer. She was upset. I tried to hold her back from storming off. Maybe that's how. But it was an accident. You heard my daughter, she slipped. The officer's eyes lingered on me, waiting, hoping I'd contradict him. But fear chained my tongue. I simply nodded. The officers exchanged glances, then closed their notebooks. We'll be in touch, one of them said before leaving. When the door shut, my father turned to me, his smile sharp as a blade. Good girl, he whispered. Something inside me snapped. Don't you dare call me that, I hissed, tears welling in my eyes. You killed her, didn't you? You pushed her. His smile vanished. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he would hit me. Instead, he leaned close, his voice low and venomous. Careful, Emma. You think the police will protect you? You think anyone will believe you now after you lied for me? You're trapped. Just like your mother was. And if you're not careful, you'll end up just like her. My chest tightened, my hands trembling violently. He was right. I had lied. I had covered for him. And now, if I tried to change my story, no one would believe me. That night, I locked my bedroom door and sat in the dark, hugging my knees to my chest. My mind spun in circles, torn between fear and fury. But deep down, a plan was already forming. If my father thought I was trapped, he was wrong. I was done being the victim. I was done letting him control me. He might have gotten away with my mother's death for now, but he wouldn't get away forever. I would make sure of that. And I didn't know it then, but my chance came sooner than I expected. Because 2 nights later, the police returned, this time, not just to ask questions. This time, they came with an arrest warrant. For my father. The pounding on the door shook me awake. I bolted upright in bed, my heart racing. For a split second, I thought it was my father. Angry, violent, ready to finish what he had started. But then I heard the familiar words shouted through the halls. Dallas Police Department. Open up. I stumbled out of bed and rushed downstairs, where uniformed officers filled the grand foyer. My father stood in his robe at the bottom of the staircase, glaring like a trapped animal. Richard Collins, one officer barked. You're under arrest for the suspected homicide of Claire Collins. My breath caught. Homicide. They had said it out loud. They weren't calling it an accident anymore. My father's face twisted into a mask of rage. This is absurd. My wife slipped. Ask my daughter, she saw it. The officers didn't budge. 2 of them grabbed his arms and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. He struggled, his voice rising with fury. Emma, tell them. Tell them it was an accident. I froze. My lips trembled. This was my moment. My chance to tell the truth. My chance to make sure justice was served. But fear gripped me again. His threat still echoed in my ears. You'll end up just like her. My voice broke. Every eye in the room was on me. My father's glare was searing, but the officer's expectant stares were heavier. I took a deep breath. I don't know what I saw, I whispered. It was too fast. The disappointment in the officer's eyes was clear, but it didn't matter. They already had evidence, bruises, inconsistencies, maybe even witnesses from the staff. My father was shoved toward the door, his shouts echoing through the house. You'll regret this, Emma. You hear me? You'll regret this. The door slammed behind them, and for the first time in days, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. The days that followed were a whirlwind of news reporters, detectives, and lawyers. My father's arrest made headlines. Texas businessman charged in wife's death. Every channel, every paper, every gossip site, his face was everywhere. And because I was his daughter, mine was too. The press spun stories about me. Orphan turned heiress, daughter of scandal, the girl who inherited millions and tragedy in the same breath. I couldn't escape it. My life wasn't private anymore. It was a spectacle. The trial date was set within weeks. And when it began, the courtroom became a battlefield. I sat on the witness bench, palms sweaty, my stomach in knots. The prosecutor questioned me gently at first. Miss Collins, can you tell us about the relationship between your parents? I hesitated. It was rocky. They argued a lot. Did you ever hear your father threaten your mother? I swallowed hard. Yes. The night before she died, he threatened me too. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My father sat across the room in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, his eyes burning holes into me. The prosecutor leaned forward. And on the night of her death, what did you hear? Tears filled my eyes. I heard her scream. And then silence. When I got there, she was already gone. And my father was standing at the top of the stairs. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. Then came the defense attorney, a sharp-eyed man with a voice as smooth as poison. Miss Collins, he said, tilting his head, you claim your father threatened you. Yet, when the police arrived, you told them your mother slipped. Isn't that correct? My throat tightened. Yes, but I was scared. Scared, he repeated slowly, walking closer. Or lying. Which is it? Because either you lied then or you're lying now. My heart pounded. The jury whispered among themselves. I was scared. I cried. He threatened me. I didn't know what else to say. The defense attorney smirked. Or maybe you simply wanted your mother's death to look like murder. Maybe you wanted your father out of the way so you could keep your aunt's fortune all to yourself. The courtroom gasped again. My head spun. How could he twist it like that? No, I shouted, my voice cracking. That's not true. I don't care about the money, I never did. But the attorney's words lingered in the air like smoke. The jury shifted uncomfortably. My father smirked, as though he could already taste victory. The trial stretched on for weeks. Witness after witness was called, neighbors, staff, even the paramedics. Some supported my story. Others claimed they didn't see enough to know. It was chaos, a tug-of-war of truths and lies. And then, one afternoon, the prosecutor dropped a bombshell. Your Honor, he said firmly, we have obtained security footage from the Collins mansion. My stomach dropped. Footage? The courtroom hushed as the video played on a large screen. The grainy black and white image showed my mother at the top of the staircase. My father's figure loomed behind her. Their movements were faint but clear enough. She turned to walk away. He grabbed her arm. She struggled. And then she fell. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, cries, whispers. I covered my mouth with my hands, tears spilling down my face. It wasn't just my suspicion anymore. It was real. Caught on tape. The judge slammed his gavel for order. My father's face turned pale, his confident mask crumbling. But then something happened I didn't expect. He turned toward me, his daughter, his blood, and shouted across the courtroom. This is your fault, Emma. If she hadn't loved you more than me, I wouldn't have done it. You ruined everything. My heart shattered into pieces. The man who was supposed to protect me, who had already destroyed me once as a child, had just blamed me for my mother's death. The jury stared at him in shock. The prosecutor seized the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said firmly, "you have just witnessed the truth, not only the act of murder, but the confession of a man who refuses to take responsibility. The case speaks for itself." My father's trial was collapsing before his eyes. But just when I thought it was over, just when I thought justice would finally be served, something happened that flipped my world upside down again. That very night, as the jury began deliberations, my father escaped custody. The news broke like wildfire. Murder suspect escapes custody. Police on high alert. I sat frozen on the couch in the mansion's living room, staring at the television screen as reporters swarmed outside the courthouse where my father had slipped away during a transfer. Details were scarce, but one thing was clear. Richard Collins was free, and he was out there somewhere. The walls of the mansion suddenly felt like a cage. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the windows made me flinch. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My father's words echoed in my head like a curse. "You'll regret this, Emma." By the second night, police patrol cars circled the property, their lights flashing across the lawn. An officer had been stationed at the gate, but even then, I felt no safer. My father wasn't the kind of man to be stopped by gates or guards. He had nothing left to lose, and that made him more dangerous than ever. It happened on the third night. I had just finished locking the doors when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. My blood turned cold. The sound came from the back of the house. I grabbed the phone, my trembling hands dialing 911, but before I could press call, the lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the mansion. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Oh God," I whispered, clutching the phone tightly. And then his voice cut through the silence. "Emma?" It was low, drawn out, almost mocking. I turned toward the sound, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. He was inside. I stumbled backward into the library, my aunt's library, where I had once felt safe. Now it felt like a tomb. My hands fumbled against the wall until they found the emergency drawer Aunt Rebecca had always kept, a drawer that held a flashlight and something else. A gun. I gripped the cold metal with shaking hands, the weight of it terrifying yet strangely empowering. My father's footsteps echoed through the halls, slow and deliberate. "You think you can betray me?" he shouted, his voice booming in the dark. "You think you can send me to rot in a cell after everything I sacrificed?" Sacrificed? The word burned in my ears. He hadn't sacrificed, he had destroyed. I held the gun out in front of me, my hands trembling violently. My throat tightened as I whispered, half to myself, half to Aunt Rebecca's memory, "Please give me strength." And then I saw him. His shadow stretched long across the marble floor as he stepped into the library doorway. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild, his hair disheveled from days on the run. He looked less like my father and more like a monster. "There you are," he sneered, stepping closer. "My daughter. My little betrayer. If I can't have the money, if I can't have the life I built, then neither can you." My chest heaved. "Stay back." I cried, my finger twitching against the trigger. He laughed, a cruel, broken sound. "You won't shoot me. You're too much like your aunt. Too weak. Too sentimental." "Try me," I whispered. For a moment, we stood frozen, father and daughter, predator and prey. The air between us was thick with rage, fear, and the weight of 15 years of abandonment. And then, in one swift movement, he lunged. I screamed, my finger tightening instinctively. Bang! The sound shattered the night, deafening in the confined space. My father staggered, his eyes wide in shock. He looked down at his chest, where blood was already spreading across his shirt. He stumbled backward, his hand reaching out as if to grab the railing, but finding nothing. "Emma," he whispered, his voice weak, almost pitiful. And then he fell. The thud of his body hitting the marble floor echoed through the mansion. Silence followed, thick, suffocating silence. The gun slipped from my hands. I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, my entire body trembling. He was gone. My father, the man who had abandoned me, threatened me, murdered my mother, was finally gone. The police stormed in minutes later, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found me on the library floor, shaking, drenched in tears. They found him lying in a pool of his own blood. Self-defense, one officer muttered, kneeling beside me. She had no choice. But even as they comforted me, even as they assured me I wasn't going to prison, a hollow ache gnawed inside me. I had survived, but at what cost? Weeks later, after the funerals, after the trial was dismissed as self-defense, after the mansion grew quiet again, I found myself standing in front of Aunt Rebecca's portrait in the grand hallway. She stared down at me, her painted eyes filled with the same warmth she had given me in life. "I did it, Aunt Rebecca," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I survived. But I don't know if I won." Because in the end, revenge hadn't felt sweet. It hadn't felt victorious. It had felt heavy, crushing, like I had carried the sins of my parents on my own shoulders. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a voice told me this was only the beginning. Because with millions in my name, a legacy tainted by blood, and a story the world would never forget, my life was no longer just about survival. It was about power. And I knew one thing for sure. What happened with my parents was only the first chapter of a much darker story waiting to unfold.